So when we talk about great villains, I mean, who do you picture? Do you picture Darth Vader? Do you picture Hannibal Lecter or Terminator or Norman Bates from Psycho? Uh, I mean, there are different villains played, and each villain has quite different background. I mean, you could say that Darth Vader has a bit sympathetic background, and Hannibal Lecter, while not sympathetic, he's still considered to be one of the best villains of all time because of his personality and the whole persona and the aura around him. It's considered to be like very cool. So, what does a great villain comprises of? I mean, does it have to have a sympathetic background, or should he have really good dialogues, or costumes, or appearance, whatever? I mean, there's like no perfect definition what a great villain is. But in comic book films, a villain can be defined by his actions that lead to changes and uh, drastic changes, if I might add, into the psyche and personal views of how the hero functions, of how he views the world, how it is changed by the actions of a villain. I mean, for example, Joker and the Green Goblin, they have both affected their respective superheroes in a way that has changed them drastically. I mean, throughout the comics, you can feel the change that they have brought into their respective superheroes. Now, when it comes to Spider-Man, there are villains that challenges, not challenges, but they challenge certain aspects of characteristics of Spider-Man. For example, let's say intellect. Intellect is challenged by Dr. Octopus. Morality, you could say it is challenged by Green Goblin. Strength, you can say it is challenged by Rhino. So these characters help Spider-Man into becoming a better superhero, so he can protect the people of New York. I mean, I do think that Spider-Man has one of the most diverse rogue galleries. You have quite sympathetic and really well thought out villains, and then you have like really fun villains. For example, let's say Rhino. I mean, sometimes I think it would be fun to see Rhino just rampaging, causing chaos and mayhem, flipping cars, and Spidey is thinking on his feet, trying to outmaneuver him, and just trying to save the day. I think that would be like a really fun thing to watch and kind of enjoy. And now let's talk about Vulture. Now, Vulture was a kind of semi silly villain in the comics, but in Homecoming, I think he was great. I personally like Vulture from Homecoming more than Mysterio. He was intimidating, and the dialogues and the motives, I think they were great. So you can say that he definitely has a sympathetic background, and you can say Mysterio. Well, I don't sympathize with Mysterio, but he was really cool, the special effects and stuff. So what does make great villain? I would love to know your thoughts. If you have any, please let me know. But today I want to talk about some villains that could actually use a little bit more of attention, and I would start by saying Red Goblin. Now, Red Goblin was created by Dan Slott and Christus Gage, and this character of Red Goblin was actually introduced in uh, Go Swinging Down. Go Swinging Down was introduced in 2018, I believe, and Red Goblin is nothing. It's a simple concept when you merge Carnage and Norman Osborn. I mean, if you know Carnage, Carnage is one of the most sadistic, malevolent, gold-loving, mouse-murdering maniac symbiote in the Marvel universe, and you have Norman Osborn. One of the most one of the best villains of all time and the arch nemesis of Spider-Man. So when you mix these two villains, Carnage and Norman Osborn, literally the two nastiest villains ever into one, I think that's a great concept. I mean, it would be like really fun to see Spider-Man taking them down. In the comics, Red Goblin was like extremely powerful. Spider-Man had to call on the help for Miles Morales and the Human Torch and Silk, all these characters trying to help him so he could take down the Red Goblin. And then he eventually called the help of Flash Thompson, who was Agent Anti-Venom. I mean, if you have studied the history of symbiotes, you know that Anti-Venom was like an extremely crazy, powerful like a really strong symbiote that has the ability to defeat Carnage. But this time, Carnage is bonding with Norman Osborn. He has a like genius level of intellect. You could say that Green Goblin was a mixture of Joker and Lex Luthor, but now being combined with the Carnage, his the potential of committing evil acts now it is limitless because Carnage he just loves killing people, and Norman Osborn wants to hate not wants to he hates Spider-Man, and he will do anything to hurt him, killing his loved ones or hurting Aunt May and stuff like that. So I think it's a great villain, like very powerful, And also, I would love to see an R-rated Spider-Man film with the Red Goblin because, as I said, like Carnage is like a very violent character, and so is Green Goblin. And I've kind of imagined the scenario where, let's say, Daredevil and Deadpool and Spider-Man, they kind of team up together to find the Red Goblin. I think it's a really cool concept. Not a lot of people know about it, but I want them to know. And I wish we could see Red Goblin someday in the MCU. Now, moving on. Second villain, which I want to talk about, is Hobgoblin. Now, Hobgoblin is kind of the underdog here because, I mean, Green Goblin is like the definitive Goblin. He's the arch nemesis of Spider-Man, and many people they kind of ridicule Hobgoblin. They say that if I want a Goblin, I would rather stick to Norman Osborn, not to anybody else, not a rip-off or a variant, and that is kind of understandable. But I will say that Hobgoblin has quite interesting origins. I mean, the mantle of a Hobgoblin has been taken by like many different people: Robin Kingsley, Ned Leeds, and Jason McIndale, and Arnold Donovan. I mean, there are many characters who have taken this mantle, but the most prominent one is obviously Roderick Kingsley. Now, he has a quite interesting origin story. Rodin Kingsley was kind of a fashion designer, like he had built this empire of his fashion designing stuff, and he was quite ruthless. He indulged in unfair practices, and he also was he was not a good guy. He sabotaged his competition by employing unfair practices. So what happened one day that when he was trying to exhibit his own stuff, one of his arch nemesis, I mean one of his rivals in the fashion designing industry, they actually attacked him, and they said that you have been sabotaging other people, you have been damaging their reputation and work for a long time. Now it's high time we repay the debt to you. But in the meantime, Spider-Man swings in and he kind of stops the chaos, before they could kill Roderick Kingsley. And this was actually introduced in Amazing Spider-Man issue. Where is it? What was it? Yeah, 1980. The first time Roderick Kingsley was introduced was Amazing Spider-Man issue 43, 1980. And then you actually see the reveal of Hobgoblin in 1983. So you can see that Marvel took their sweet time before revealing the true identity of Hobgoblin in Amazing Spider-Man issue number 238. So when we read the comic, we realize that one of the kind of like small time thugs that worked for Kingsley, they actually discovered the lair of Green Goblin. And then he led his boss to this lair where Green Goblin or Norman Osborn kept his costume and his Goblin serum formula and all of his pumpkin bombs and glider. So Roderick Kingsley thought that he should now take the mantle of Goblin, but he wants to be better. He wants to be different. So the creator Roger Stern, he went on with a more medieval look for the Hobgoblin, and he designed him to be a little bit different with the color scheme and stuff. So Hobgoblin, I think, is like a really interesting concept and a really interesting villain too. And in the comics, Ned Leeds, he was a journalist. He also was investigating Roderick Kingsley, and eventually he also found out that who the Hobgoblin is. And then Hobgoblin, he not tries, he actually brainwashed Ned Leeds into becoming Hobgoblin. Now, talking about MCU, after No Way Home, after the things have changed drastically in Spider-Man's life, now Ned Leeds does not know who Peter is. So it would be like a really awesome idea to turn Ned Leeds into Hobgoblin. It would be like really this Captain America and Winter Soldier stuff, where Spider-Man recognizes Ned, but Ned does not recognize Peter. I think that's like a really interesting concept, and I would love for that to happen. And the third villain I want to talk about is quite underrated, and his name is Craven the Hunter. And Craven the Hunter is like one of the most underrated Spider-Man villains because I do think that he is quite an interesting villain and a complex character because his origin story, his background is quite amazing. I think he was first introduced in Amazing Spider-Man issue 15, and he was created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, the legendary duo. So Craven the Hunter, it was the background story is that he was born in an aristocratic family in Soviet Russia. And in the February Revolution, when the peasant class overthrew the aristocrats, he escaped and he came to live in United States of America. And he thought that the true meaning of life lies within hunt. And he despised using guns and all the modern gadgets. And he defeated one of the strongest animals, just with his bare hands, or maybe traditional weapons like bow and arrow and stuff like that. And he actually wanted to prove himself that he can be a better Spider-Man. I mean, I'm talking about uh, Craven's Last Hunt. Now, Craven's Last Hunt is one of the most uh, acknowledged, and it is also considered to be one of the best Spider-Man comics. Not only best Spider-Man comics, it is considered to be one of the greatest comic books of all time. Craven's Last Hunt is also one of the more darker Spider-Man stories, which I really love. And in the comic, if you read, you will realize that he is quite complicated. I mean, in the comics we start that he is failing health, and if for him, there's no purpose in life other than proving himself to be a superior Spider-Man. So in one of the instances, he actually used a gun to tranquilize him, and even Spider-Man says that, "Come on, Craven. I mean, that's not how you do. That's not how you do your work. You use more traditional weapons and traditional fighting styles. Guns is not your style." But Craven did not kill him with a gun. He only tranquilized him and he buried him inside a grave. And Spider-Man was stuck in that grave for 2 darn weeks. And in that time, he took up the mantle of Spider-Man and he started going after Vermin. Now, Vermin was one of the characters which Spider-Man did not defeat alone. He had to take the assistance of Captain America. So he wanted to defeat Vermin and to prove himself to be superior Spider-Man. It's a really interesting storyline. Every Spider-Man fan should definitely get their hand on this comic. I mean, I have, and I absolutely loved it. So I do think that Kraven the Hunter can be like a really good villain, and I would love to see him in MCU in someday. And the fourth villain, which I want to talk about, is Morbius. Now, Morbius was introduced in Amazing Spider-Man issue 101 in 1971, and he was created by Gil Kane and Thomas Roy. Now, Morbius is also one of the more compelling and complex characters. So his background is that Michael Morbius, he was actually born and raised in Greece. He lived with his mom, and he actually had one rare degenerative blood disease, which slowly killed him, and it also affected his bodily appearance. And as a result of that, he lived a life of isolation. So he spent his time reading books, and he also had a gifted mind. He eventually went on to even win the Nobel Prize. So after all the knowledge he had gained, and he was trying to cure himself of the disease. He wanted to become a healthier man. He wanted to live longer. That's like a really good motivation. So he took an electroshock therapy, if I remember correctly. He kind of mixed the vampire bat's DNA, and he did the electroshock therapy with him. But it really did not give the desired results, but it did give him pseudo vampiric tendencies, where now he has to look for human blood. He has to consume human blood in order to sustain himself, and now he became even more hideous. Now Michael Morbius absolutely hates the idea that he has to kill people in order to sustain himself, and but at the same time he wants to live longer too, and we cannot really blame him for that. I mean, a lot of people want to live longer. So I do think that's like a very compelling concept. The first time I saw him was in the Spider-Man series that came in the 90s. It was actually made to be kid friendly. That's why they actually, instead of showing him biting necks and sucking the blood, he actually had some holes in his hands, and then he would place them like this, and he would suck up the plasma. They really did not use the word blood in there. So he was kind of toned down for the sake of children. But I do think an R-rated Morbius film will do wonders. And Spider-Man, as we know that. Unlike Green Goblin, he's like Morbius is not like completely evil. He does not want to kill people, but he has to. So it would be a really awesome dynamic between Spider-Man. How will he stop Morbius? I think that would be really awesome. And I wish to see him in a crossover. I mean, I know the film is coming in January, but I would love to see a Spider-Man crossover with Morbius. No, I will say that when he first appeared, he was not planned to have his own series in 1971, when he was first when he made his first appearance. But I think it was like 1974 where Morbius actually received his own comic. I think its name was Adventure into Fear. Morbius the Living Vampire. And then in the late 90s, you had the Midnight Suns, where Marvel had all its, kind of supernatural characters, like Moon Knight and Johnny Blaze, Ghost Rider, as you know. And then you had Damon Hellstorm, and then you also had Morbius, the characters which kind of had a little bit supernatural element to them. So I do think that Morbius is like a really compelling, really dynamic character, and we could do wonders with him. And the last villain which I want to talk about, that would be Martin Lee. And I think Martin Lee was created by, as you know it, Dan Slott and Phil Jimenez. And he is quite one of the recent Spider-Man villains. He was created in 2007 in the Free Comic Book Day, the Amazing Spider-Man issue 1, I believe. And Martin Lee has very intriguing background. So the background of Martin Lee is as follows: that one of he was actually a slave. He was from a province in China called Fujian, and he was being transferred to the United States of America as an overseas slave for Kenya. And the boat, it actually hit a storm, and all the crew evacuated themselves, and all the slaves were left to die. But he still survived, and he crawled to the shores of New York, and he fortunately survived the accident of the ship. But later, it was believed that he was captured by the Magias and Don Silverman. And a biochemist, Simon Marshall, he performed some experiments on him, giving him some synthetic drug as a substitute of heroin. And what it did, that it allowed him to gain access to the mystical power called the Dark Force. Now, it's not really explained in the comics that how did he receive that Dark Force power. I mean, if you have played the Spider-Man PS4 game, which is absolutely, by the way, brilliant, I loved every second of it. Martin Lee was done justice in that game, because he had a sympathetic background, his appearance was top notch, and he actually had this power of dark force, where he could corrupt the mind of people. He can use them, he can charge melee weapons with them, this kind of black electrical energy, this mystical power which he can tap into. Now, dark force is not like completely defined in the Marvel universe. Dark force is like, I mean, it is believed that when Big Bang happened, when the universe formed, there was this dark universe that formed out of dark matter. So somehow Martin Lee was able to tap into that power, and he can harness this black electrical energy from the dark dimension or the dark parallel universe. And I think it's like a really interesting concept. And Martin Lee, also known as Mr. Negative, they're like two alter egos. Martin Lee actually found Feast, a shelter for the homeless, where Aunt May volunteered to help. And he was a philanthropist, and his alter ego, Mr. Negative, he wants to be like the kingpin of the Chinatown. He wants to be the boss of the Chinatown. I do think that Martin Lee is quite underrated, because, as I said, not a lot of people know about him. But I do think, with that amount of intriguing background, and the fact that he can tap into this whole dark force and mystical thing, I think that's like really great. And with that thing, with the magical elements coming to it, I think he can also be part of the multiverse thing. He can work with characters like Doctor Strange and America Chavez. I think that would be great. I mean, he has a lot of potential. He could also serve as like the kingpin of Chinatown, and then he could also serve as some sort of entity who is not like completely explained. There's mystery to him, and somehow he can tap into the magical powers. I think that's like a really great idea. So I do think these are like my five underrated villains. Like, if you have any other opinion, please let me know, because if you want, I can do a video on them too. I mean, that's what I like to do. So yeah, these were like my five villains: a Red Goblin, Hobgoblin, and Craven the Hunter, and Morbius, and Martin Lee. And they would definitely make great villains if a good script is given to them. And I can hope that John Watts, the director of the Home trilogy, if he is given the this kind of the task of introducing these villains, I think he will do a fantastic job. He gave us three amazing villains. I mean, it was Vulture. It was big. Vulture was not a good villain in the comics, but he turned into more like a really badass villain. He gave us Mysterio, which was again awesome, and Green Goblin. Oh my God, what do I even say about Green? I mean, William Dafoe was brilliant in Spider-Man 1, but he was much more menacing in No Way Home, if you ask me. So yeah, I really trust this guy when it comes to handling Spider-Man villains, and I would love to see him kind of taking charge of introducing these villains into the Spider-Man universe as well. So these are my thoughts. Please let me know. As I said, I love reading comments and I appreciate all the love and support which I've been receiving by the kind people who have been watching my stuff. Even an idiot like me, who's not really good at stuff like editing, but people have been like really kind to me, and I appreciate that kindness. You people are a source of inspiration and positivity for me. So yeah, please let me know in the comments, and I guess I'll see you later. So bye.